Welcome to AI Near and Far, the podcast where we talk with creators, innovators, business executives, and curious minds who are using AI to transform the way they work, think, and create. I'm Brad Moss, the CEO of Enhanced AI and the host of this podcast. In each episode, I sit down with someone who's putting AI to use in real, meaningful ways. We'll explore how they've used AI in the past, what they're building right now, and where they see it going in the future. Along the way, we'll dive into their personal takes on the opportunities, challenges, and surprises that come with this fast-moving tech. This show is here to spark ideas, share insights, and help you enhance your own experience with AI. All right, so we're excited to announce a brand new interactive feature for our listeners. As we are brainstorming and knowing that we're AI first, we're starting this week that each episode will come with its own AI-powered chatbot, and it's linked in the description of this episode. So the chatbots are designed to answer your questions as if you're talking directly to the guest. So it's trained on their insights from the show and their public work. So you can dive deeper, explore their ideas, or even ask follow-up questions we didn't get to during the interview. Just click on the link and start chatting with this week's guest. All right, we're thrilled to be back for another episode of the AI Near Far podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a real pioneer in the field of AI, Dr. Craig A. Kaplan. Dr. Kaplan, or Craig, what should we call you?
Craig is fine.
Craig's fine, okay. I mean, you've earned that doctorate degree, so you definitely earned the title. So Craig's the founder and CEO of the IQ Company, a cutting-edge consulting firm specializing in advanced AI. And superintelligence systems. And long before superintelligence became a buzzword, Craig was already staking his claim in this space, acquiring superintelligence.com back in 2006. Now that's some serious foresight. His journey through the AI landscape is nothing short of amazing. After he's earning his doctorate from Carnegie Mellon, where he had a rare privilege of collaborating with Nobel laureate Dr. Herbert Simon, Craig went on to serve a visiting professor at the University of California. But he's not just an academic. Craig's an entrepreneurial mind behind Predict Wall Street, which is, I'm really excited to talk about that in a minute, where he harnessed the collective intelligence of millions of retail investors to power the top 10 hedge fund performance in 2018. Yes. You figured out how to do the wisdom of crowds into beating the market, which is just awesome. And another thing that's compelling and quite amazing is how he's bridged the technical aspects of AI with the question about the ethics of humanity's future. And when he's not developing patents or consulting with major enterprises, he's advocating or understanding of how humans and machines can collaborate and solve complex problems. So, Craig, super excited to have you here on the show.
Brad, great to be here with you.
Great. Well, with that big, long intro, hopefully people have a little bit of a flavor that what we'll jump in here today. Now, let's talk about superintelligence.com. Back in the day, where was your mind in the early 2000s? I mean, most of the time, this is just shortly after the dot-com bubble, and people are unsure about dot-com and where computers were headed. Maybe give me kind of your insight into where you were back then.
So I think the theme of my life, at least my adult life, has been intelligent systems from the 1980s on. And it was actually around 1999, I think even before the turn of the century there, that I sort of understood in very broad terms how the evolution of intelligent systems was going to go. I could see that we had human intelligence, that was going to lead to collective intelligence. Crowdsourcing wasn't a thing then. Nobody heard of that word, but we were actually building crowdsourcing systems. We didn't call them that, but that's what they were. And that out of collective human intelligence would finally emerge AI, which of course dates all the way back to 1956. Yeah. But I kind of had the sense that it would come into its own. I didn't know the exact date. And then from AI, I could see that the next step would be superintelligence, And then beyond that, if we want to really zoom out, I think we're headed towards planetary intelligence. So I could
Ooh.
see the whole sequence, and I've been staring at this sequence for decades, and I don't know that I'm much smarter than the average person or anybody else, but it's just if you stare at a problem long enough, you tend to think about it a lot. And so now it's been really exciting to just watch the world sort of march along, and it's not exactly on the same path, maybe on the same dates that I would say, but pretty much the trajectory is sort of what I understood back then.
That's so. Now, I mean, it's pretty rare to kind of have that kind of good insight. And I think it's even more rare. I mean, everyone comes up with ideas, right? It's like, oh, it could be this, could be that. But it's even more rare to find someone with enough conviction in it to kind of follow through, right? And to stay with it. What's kind of kept you kind of anchored in all of this? Obviously, superintelligence.com, like that's probably that's a great URL. I wish I would have had that back then, right? But what's kind of like been your conviction to stay with this stuff when other people were talking about crypto or mobile apps or whatever that was coming along that could have distracted you along the way?
So I think it's just really being passionate and excited about that core idea of intelligent systems.
Yeah.
And then, there's the academic side, and I've spent time in academia, and there's lots of great ideas there. But I was always a little dissatisfied because they weren't building the system. So the ideas were just staying ideas. They'd be in journals. Maybe some of your peers would read them. Maybe it would be ignored on the library shelf. I remember going in as a graduate student and seeing these big library shelves of just journal after journal. And some of them were like the Journal of Nonsense symbol memorization, and I was like, oh my gosh, does anybody even read this anymore? And so part of me coming out of grad school, I was like, okay, I like academia, I like the ideas, I like working with the really smart folks, but I really had this hankering to build something, and that's sort of what led me into industry. And then I tried to apply the things that I had learned, from some of these really great minds and actually build systems using some of their ideas. And that's what led to Predict Wall Street and to a lot of the different systems that we've built.
Yeah. Okay. So before we jump into that stuff, talk to me a little bit about your time at Carnegie Mellon and working with Herbert Simon, and maybe how that influenced some of your AI or your approach to it, or kind of what you learned there.
Yeah, that was a super exciting time. I kind of felt like, if you remember the movie Forrest Gump, where he's always showing up and he just somehow magically shows up at the right time by luck. That's kind of how it felt to me, because I arrived at Carnegie Mellon as a grad student, I think 1984, 85. And at that time, it was just the beginning of the transition from what I would call the first age of AI to the second age. I think we've had 3 periods. So the first period was 1956, when the field was named at a Dartmouth conference. And Herbert Simon, Nobel laureate, Turing Award winner, super smart guy, he and 10 other scientists met at Dartmouth, and that they argued about it, and they came up with the name AI. But at that conference, he and Alan Newell and a guy named Cliff Shaw, the 3 of them, were the only ones that actually presented a working AI system. So maybe I got a little bit of the hankering to build something from Herb, because everyone was having academic debates, and there he was with a working system in 1956.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the first stage, and that was symbolic AI, because in those days, everything had to be programmed into the AI. You had to think, you'd interview an expert and then sort of extract their knowledge about something and then code rules that the expert had in their head and try to build that into an AI system. That was symbolic AI. 1984-85 was the beginning of machine learning, where it really began to be treated very seriously. And that was, people probably familiar with the name Jeff Hinton, who invented, or was one of the inventors of the co-author of the backpropagation algorithm. That was the fundamental algorithm that underlies GPT and Gemini and all of those AI large language models that we all use today.
They're all built on that one kernel.
They're all based on backpropagation and then the subsequent iterations on that. And the idea was, hey, instead of programming rules into the AI, what if we could shovel a lot of data at it give it an algorithm and let it learn the rules. It'll learn on its own. And it was a great idea, but in the 1980s, the computers weren't powerful enough to really do much. They
Yeah.
could learn little things. My office mate, I remember, got a PhD for using this approach to recognize the letter A. Just the letter A in any orientation. That was worth a PhD in the 1980s
Yeah.
because it took, forever for the computer to crunch on all that to even just recognize a single letter. And then a lot of the progress is really due to the increase in computing power. We had self-driving cars in the 1980s, believe it or not, but they went about 2 inches an hour. They were running in the park next to my office, and I'd go running and I'd pass them. And there they were stuck on the path looking at a leaf, trying to figure out for an hour, is it a leaf? Is it a person? Can I move forward? It was that kind of thing. I once did the math. Those same cars could go 186 miles an hour with the exact same algorithms if they simply had today's PCs in them instead of loaded with the old PCs.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of the machine learning era. And then the next one that I think everybody's most familiar with is Thanksgiving 3 years ago with the release of ChatGPT. That kind of ushered in the age when AI is really taken off. So this has kind of been the sequence. And I've been like along for the ride. I arrived kind of in the middle. I wasn't born in 1956. I arrived right when the symbolic guys and the machine learning guys were duking it out and having heated academic arguments about what was the right way and what's going to, triumph. And then I've sort of been following it and building systems all along right up until now. So that's kind of been the path. And lots of things have come, crypto and, blockchain and all kinds of exciting stuff. And some of those can be actually complementary with the AI technology. But it's not the same. For me, like there's nothing more exciting than understanding how the human mind works and how you can build an artificial intelligence. Kind of like, I think Demis Hassabis said it really well. This is the one problem. If you solve this, it can solve all the other problems. So that's amazing leverage right there.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. I don't. Did you? I often quote the Google paper that came out in 2017 about attention is everything, and that kind of shifted the whole mindset of how to do this whole AI. Did you pay attention to that when it came out, or were you in that kind of sphere talking about it, like one of the underneath the hood kind of guys?
I definitely read that paper. It's a great paper, and that transformers and sort of that mechanism, if you go down, it's actually built on backpropagation and all those other things. So that was like a big leap forward. So the algorithms have definitely improved, but they're all sort of in the general space of, this kind of machine learning that's based on the brain, based on, brains are networks of neurons. And, this is what Jeff Hinton and a number of other people, Jay McClellan, Rumelhart, they all came up with this idea of, wow, if that's how the brain does it, can we construct an artificial neural network?
Yeah.
And then it's like, what are the learning algorithms for that neural network? Can we do transformers and attention is all you need? That paper, those were improvements on how that network's going to learn. But the basic idea of, hey, we got to have a network and we got to have feedback, that was like mid-1980s.
Yeah, early days. Well, I often quote that Google paper because that's, I think, where OpenAI finally took off. And I remember the story. You probably know the story too. I love this validation from someone I haven't spoken with someone who's been this deep into this, not one-on-one. And I've been deep into it for 4 years, not as long as you. But when OpenAI first started, or a lot of those folks in the community, they started training these neural networks. And they trained it on, I think, about 100 million pieces of data. And like it had barely gone anywhere. Like it wasn't very smart. And a lot of folks wanted to abandon. They're like, it's not going to work. But then I think there's an advisor or a senior person inside of OpenAI who said, no, we're just not there yet on the scale, on the growth scale. We're only at 100 million. This needs to be a lot more. And so he actually got the funding and the folks together to actually create the machines to accelerate the learning that it needed to do instead of abandoning at 100 million pieces of data, which is a lot of data.
Right.
It took them to 175 billion pieces of data to get to GPT-3, which is even before ChatGPT, right?
Yes, this has been a long-standing, way back to the 80s, that was the debate. The feeling was, well, these are just little toys. They're never going to really be able to do anything useful. And you had to really be a visionary like Jeff Hinton to say, I don't care what everybody's saying. I have faith in this thing, because the computing power was not there to process, even, a million pieces of data, really. It was very limited. And, but the interesting thing, the claim, the vision was always intelligence will emerge. It's called emergent properties. So you have a network, and it's the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of idea. There's this synergy that happens. If you can get enough knowledge in, then somehow you cross a tipping point and boom, intelligence emerges. Yeah. And of course, these days people talk about scaling laws, which is basically just sort of a mathematical observation that as you put more and more data in, the intelligence does seem to increase. And there's debate about, is there limits to when that's going to stop? Yeah. But so far, it's definitely stood OpenAI and a lot of these companies in good stead.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it seems like there's certain diminishing returns. And oh man, I just want to keep going into the technology with you. I feel I was at a meeting in our local government and here, and some folks from Washington came back here. And just this last week, we were talking about someone from OpenAI was in the meeting, Google was in the meeting. And I gave a little presentation and saying that I think 2026 is the year of context, because I feel like the models, the way I describe it, AI is the right brain of technology. What we've been doing since then was the left brain of technology. It's exact, precise versus generative and creative. And you actually need to connect the two to actually get really good stuff out of it. And you need to have systems that go back and forth and give the right kind of context to these models to do stuff. And so my prediction is, people talked about this year was 2025 was agents, and I think next year there's going to be a lot more about context, because you got to give these their own. You can't keep training these things forever to know everything about everything, because even the human brain, you need context to be able to respond appropriately, and getting those context systems and engines in place, I think, is kind of the next evolution of AI.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Definitely persistent memory and context is going to be key. I was at a conference in Iceland, of all places, an AGI conference in Iceland, and Henry Minsky, who is the son of Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky is like a legend in the field of AI. For those of us who've been in there, he's passed away a long time, from MIT. He was one of the true pioneers, and he had a son, which I didn't know, and there's his son presenting at this conference. And the point that I took away from it was, he was saying, studying children, very young human children, and you just put a child in a playpen with some toys, and they are able to form concepts and come up with cause and effect and all kinds of things, which if you tried to get an AI, a large language model, to do it, you'd have to give it so much data, in a data center full of computational power, and yet this human child's able to do it so efficiently. And he said, the question we need to be asking is not, can we do it with all these data centers, but how come we can't do it a little bit more efficiently, kind of like the humans do? And I think that's related to your issue of context. There's so much to pay attention to. There's got to be more efficient ways. So we're just in the infancy of this technology. There's so much more progress. And I like that you're kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, well, it feels like these LLMs have kind of hit like diminishing returns of how smart they can get, but that's only one part of the equation. It's the whole, you got to give it the context at the right time and the right moment to do the right model, do the right thing, et cetera, and retrieve the right information. Now, because we're all about business application, and so we're seeing, and we're trying to achieve 99.9% accuracy with everything that we do in all the applications we do. So it's, how do you get this really, fluid machine to get really 99% accurate, 100% accurate on something that you're doing? And we found that context is everything. Context and breaking it down and not overloading the machine.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I'm so fascinated by context, because there's got to be better ways of loading these systems with the right context. Well, we're working on some, and I'm sure others are as well. But that leads to the business question. Okay, so I want to talk about Predict Wall Street. So what was the impetus for this? Maybe give us like your quick, one doesn't need to be quick, just your summary of kind of what you were thinking, what led to Predict Wall Street, kind of what happened, and how AI was a critical part in in what you did there. Actually, I mean, tell people what Predict Wall Street was. In kind of
Sure. So I'll tell you how this evolved. Again, I started with what I love doing, intelligent systems, and I was fascinated with this idea of collective intelligence. People talk about crowdsourcing, swarm intelligence. It's the idea that many minds are better than one. And I was convinced that this really was the way forward. And if we apply it to modern day AI, it'd be the architecting systems of agents rather than a single agent. But anyway, back in the 1990s, late 1990s and early 2000s, I became convinced that this was the way, but we had to prove it because I didn't want to just write a paper about it. I wanted to build a system that showed people. And so we had a pizza and beer brainstorming party at my company, and we had interns, an intern from, I think, Berkeley School of Business. And we were saying, what problem could we choose, that's really hard, and if nobody could dispute if it, performs well here, it would be absolutely good proof. And this MBA said, well, I mean, if you got an edge in the financial markets, that would do it. And I was like, huh. I knew nothing about Wall Street or stock trading or anything like that. We just thought, wow, what a great problem, because financial markets have a built-in scorecard, right? Are you profitable or not? I mean, it's ruthless and it's highly competitive. You got all the best human brains. People that normally would be working on physics and cosmology are recruited to Wall Street, to come make money. And so you got these super smart people in a domain with a scorecard that's very competitive. It was a really hard problem. That's what we were looking for. If we could do it in that, we could do it anywhere. That's what we figured. And of course, we thought it would be easy. I think it was 2001. There was a conference in Belgium, Brussels, called the First Annual Global Brain Conference, which is kind of a funny name. But I presented a prototype of a system that basically took the collective intelligence of humans. So the idea of Predict Wall Street was many brains are better than one. What if you could have like 1 million retail investors, just average people? They would get killed if they went head to head with a Wall Street pro, but they're trading on their own account or whatever. What if you could have millions of these guys and you could harness their collective intelligence? Could you outperform the guys on Wall Street, the very best guys? That was the idea. And so we built a prototype, and I think we got lucky, quite frankly, because it was a small, like a 3-week test period. And I got some people who were from a charity, Save Our Shores, clean up the beaches type thing. And I just said, we'll pay you so much for every stock prediction that you put in. And I had people make stock predictions, and we integrated this data, and then we, used that system to sort of say, buy this or sell this. And it did great. It did fantastic. It beat the market by a huge amount of time, a huge percentage over that period. And I thought, wow, we're really onto something. Looking back with everything I now know about Wall Street, I realized that we might have been a little bit lucky. The market just happened to move, in a big way, and we happened to make good calls. And yes, there was some collective intelligence, but not nearly as much as we thought. So anyway, that was 2001. We raised venture capital. By the time 2006 rolled around, I was very slow on this because we were doing consulting and other things. Yeah. We raised money, and we partnered with some of the brokerage firms like TD Ameritrade and Charles Schwab and NASDAQ. So we had really big name partners, and we would put a little widget that was like a poll. So every time you went to Schwab to trade Apple, the chart would come up, and underneath would be a little widget that said, do you think Apple's going up or down, tomorrow, next week, or whatever? We made it super easy. You just clicked an up arrow or a down arrow, and we had 24/7 all these predictions from retail investors coming into the system. And then we used sort of our version of an intelligent system of harnessing that to create trading signals. And it took us a little while, but by the time we got to 2018, we thought we'd be done already. But finally, we were powering a hedge fund that ranked in the top 10. And so I felt, okay, we've mission accomplished. We did like $2 billion worth of trades, so it wasn't a small number of trades. And so we proved it. So that's why I'm very confident that this will work for AI, because I invested all that time in using human entities. Yeah.
Now, well, the business side of me wonders what happened to that company. Did you sell that company? Did somebody acquire it? What happened?
Yeah, I sold it in 2020, and it was a private deal, so I can't disclose the terms. But and I think the buyers really just took the IP. Like Predict Wall Street itself, the website is no longer out there. But You can find it on the Wayback Machine if you're really interested.
Well, that's awesome. That sounds like a super fun. Yeah, I mean that a really good success case. Like whenever I think of technology, I always think of, well, how does this apply to the real world? I mean, because part of my brain will just go off in like theory and diving deep and just loving that and creating stuff. But then the other side always, maybe it's my mother in me, where she's just like, how do you make this, applicable or whatever. So I kind of come reeling back. It's like, well, how's this applicable in the real life and actually doing something with it? And that's a fantastic, one of the best I've heard of case studies of making AI work in the real world in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I have that similar bent. It's cool to think of the idea, but there's some part of me that's not quite satisfied until it like actually does something, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, okay, okay, let's fast forward a little bit more to today. Now, what are you working on today? And kind of what's in your realm today with AI, and that you're kind of dealing with like even like this week or the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so after Predict Wall Street, I sort of took a look around because when you're sometimes running a company, you're very heads down. Like all my meetings are with Wall Street guys and data guys and hedge fund guys. And all of a sudden, I was able to zoom out and look at the bigger world of AI and what has been happening. I've been following a little bit, but I realized that tremendous progress had been made because there was an AI winter, and we'd definitely come out of that AI winter that happened kind of in the early 90s. And I realized that people were building systems, but because AI had come to be, it had become dominated essentially by machine learning. So there's good things and bad things about that. The good thing is it's really easy and fast. Like all you have to do is get a lot of data. I mean, it's a little more complicated, but basically the idea is get a lot of data, get a lot of GPUs, train up your model, and wait for intelligence to emerge. I mean, that actually works. Nobody thought that would work back in the 80s, or a few people, like pioneers, thought it would, but most of the AI community thought, nah, that's not going to work. Are you kidding? Like just spontaneously intelligence emerges? That seemed like a long shot. And son of a gun, it actually worked. So that was good. But the bad part was that method itself had some flaws because what you're training up is a black box. You have the old days, when you put in a rule, you knew exactly what rules you put into the system. You knew exactly what the system knew. You could predict exactly or pretty close to what the system would do. Now it's a black box you've trained up and you can't predict what it's going to do. And so you're building something, and then the only way you find out if it's safe, for example, and this is now where we're going to AI safety, which is kind of my focus, you realize, wow, we don't know. We just have to ask it questions. Tell me how to make a bioweapon. And then when it starts telling you, you say, oh, okay, no, we can't have that. Don't tell people how to make bioweapons. Don't do this, don't do that. Well, that's like a game of whack-a-mole because you're putting on safety on after the fact. That's not the way to do it. Back early in my career, right after grad school and before I started IQ Company, there was a 4.5-year period where I worked for IBM and I wrote a book on software quality. And I can boil that whole book down to an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You have to design systems to be safe. You can't like build the car with no brakes and then, I mean, at least if you're responsible, you shouldn't do that. And then kill a few pedestrians and say, gosh, we should have put brakes in there. No, please don't do that. Engineer it to be safe. And people are not doing that with AI because it's an arms race. Everyone's rushing. There's competitive pressures. There's money to be made. And the current methods of guardrailing after the fact, we're barely scraping by with that right now. And that is not sustainable because what's going to happen is these systems are going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And what does that mean? You're getting a smarter and smarter black box. It was unpredictable when it wasn't that smart. Now it's like really smart. Maybe it's smarter than you or I, and it's still unpredictable, and we still don't know what's in there. And that's just dangerous, right? So we have to come up with a smarter way to do it. But because we operate in a capitalist society, which I know well from Wall Street and VCs and all that stuff, you're dead on arrival if you say the answer is to slow down or pause or regulate. No, it's not going to work. The US regulates, China won't. Google slows down, OpenAI won't. It's not going to work. I'm sorry, that's not the world we live in. So you have to be smarter about it. You have to show people a way that is more profitable, that is faster, that is smarter, more intelligent system coming out, and cheaper and safer. It has to do all those things. And the good news is that's possible. You just have to look at the problem a different way. And the different way that most people are not looking at it right now is the collective intelligence lens. And briefly, what that means is the standard approach is build a bigger and bigger black box, GPT-4, GPT-5, GPT-6, just make it more and more dangerous. The collective intelligence way is say, take whatever models exist already. We don't need to spend 100 billion or 500 billion on a data center. We just need to be smart in how we plug these together. And just like in a society, so Brad, I can't see inside your brain and you can't see inside my brain, but I am not worried at all that you're going to destroy humanity, because as you start taking actions, even if I didn't trust you to be a good person, which I do, I could see your actions. There's transparency in society and we have rules governing the interaction. Similarly, in a model like a society of AIs or a community of AIs, every action that the individual AI takes is visible, transparent.
Yeah.
And so even though you don't have transparency into the individual AI, you have transparency into the group and to the actions that are taking. So if you design superintelligence to emerge out of the collective intelligence of a democracy of AIs, you have a much safer system. You have a much cheaper system because the components already exist. You have a much faster system because you can assemble it right away. And you have a more profitable system, and it's safer, which is what I really want. But all those other good things come for free.
Holy cow! That reminds me of crypto. First of all, like that's one of the reasons cryptocurrency works is the openness and the visibility of every single transaction that ever happened.
Yes.
Doing that on
Actually,
AI,
there's some great analogies to crypto, and we've written some of our patents. We've talked about this. So in Bitcoin, if you think about Bitcoin, right, and it's susceptible to a 51% attack. If you could get the majority of the people on the network bad actors, they theoretically could sort of reroute all the Bitcoin to their, wallet or whatever. But the system relies on the fact that A, it's really hard to get the majority of all those different people that are participating to all become bad, and to gather that computing power. So it's really a community-based system where you're relying on the good actors to serve as checks and balances on the bad actors. And that's exactly the same kind of idea that you can have with AI if you design it correctly.
that's bad. I mean, my mind actually goes to society too. As humans interact with governments and government systems, if majority of folks, I mean, the whole idea of voting, right, is if majority of people choose something that's bad, then that bad thing will happen. But it's almost a societal contract that we all have to, that we all choose, the majority will choose the right thing. And that's been functioning in our government for, 200 years, 250 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a way to frame this as democratic AI. It's kind of something that people can relate to. They understand human democracy. This is a democracy of AI agents, but there's one key piece that we haven't talked about that is important for this to work. And the good news is it's already happening. It's on that little trajectory that we mentioned at the beginning, marching along. So if you listen to Meta, for example, Facebook, Meta, what are they doing? They're doing superintelligence. If you listen, I can't help it. Part of my brain is still stuck in Wall Street, so I listen to all the earnings calls.
Hey,
right?
that's part of you. That's great.
And so I do that. So there's Zuckerberg on the earnings call talking about personalized superintelligence. And I'm going, yeah, finally, we've now hit that point. Because it's so obvious to me. If I'm Meta, I have all your data, Instagram, all your social media data, all that. How hard is it for them to make something where you press a button and your AI is instantly personalized with all your data that they already have on their platform? They should be doing that already. I'm sure it's in the works. I don't know. No insider information. I'm just logically suggest they should do that.
I mean,
And if they don't do it, other people will do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So from my Amazon background, I used to run the whole Seller Central platform inside of Amazon, and several years after leaving, it dawned on me the star system, the feedback system is totally broken. Like the 5 stars, like it becomes gaming. It becomes a game for a lot of folks, and and that doesn't, at a certain point, it stopped meaning something to people. And that's where some of the evolution of these influencers come into play. It's like, well, I like this person because they have these values that I have. They like these things that I like. So whatever they suggest, I know I'm probably going to like that, which is a way more personalized and valuable way of applying, a recommendation system for a product that you might want, which is the next evolution from the 5 stars, which I was saying, that's been kind of broken. And I think Amazon's trying to do that. And this idea of AI in the same way, I think it's more than just the intelligence right there. It's also in the products that we have or that were suggested, that are suggested to us. It's like, yeah, well, I'm only going to want that because it knows that much about my personal preferences and who I am. Like, if I'm an audiophile, you're going to know I'm going to want to get the best speaker system that there is out there. But if I'm like just a quasi audiophile, like I don't need the best one. I just need a pretty good, right? And
right.
Much about me, and then that's the power of this individualism.
Yeah, absolutely. And so take that same idea, which you've just done a terrific job of describing in terms of personalizing preferences.
Yep.
And now let's just generalize it a little bit. So you have an AI agent. It not only knows your preferences, it knows all your experience. It knows what you're good at. But even more important than that, it knows your values and your ethics. And you now multiply by millions of people, and Brad has his personalized AI that has his ethics and his values. Craig has his ethics and his values. Mohammed over in Saudi Arabia has his values, his ethics, worldwide. You put all these things on a network in a democracy of AI agents where they are carrying the values of the humans, and you now have not Anthropic that has a room full of 5 programmers who writes a constitution for the other 8 billion people on the planet. No, you have a representative democracy basically reflecting human values across all cultures, and there will be conflicts, and when there are, we have voting mechanisms and other ways to work it out. So, I mean, I can see it all coming.
I love this concept. So let me actually just also dovetail on this a little bit. People are like, hey, is AI going to be like Terminator? And I'm like, no, it's much more like Jarvis, right? From Iron Man, where it's like your assistant Jarvis versus like a Terminator that's going to kill everybody. But the idea becomes, if everyone has their own Jarvis that has its own ethics based on that person, how do you mingle with a billion Jarvises, and how do they mingle together and actually create a structure where they can operate properly together? That's visionary. That's amazing.
And that's what you need. You need a common protocol. And the amazing thing is that we don't even have to invent it. Some of those great minds that are no longer with us, like Herb Simon and Alan Newell and the pioneers, Marvin Minsky wrote a book called Society of Minds way back when. Everyone forgets about him because they only checked into AI in the last 10 years and nobody talked about Minsky. But he was right there at the beginning. He thought about all these things. And how do you have that interaction? And Newell and Simon had a theory of human problem solving. It works for both AIs and humans. Anything can be represented as a problem. Almost all, there's perception and certain cognitive activities that are not problem solving, but most of what we think of as intelligence is really problem solving. So if you have a universal architecture for problem solving, it works with AI, it works with humans, it's auditable, it's transparent. So all that stuff that we're hand waving a little because we only got like 30 minutes or something, but there are ways to build that whole thing out. But I want to bring it to something, because I went to your website and I really like this in your mission statement there, to augment your superpowers with AI, keeping people at the heart of everything we do. Now that is actually incredibly visionary, because that is what trumps technology. I know we're talking tech here and there's a tech thing, but I got to tell you, in the long run, I am very sure that this is not a technological problem. There's real risk, by the way. The longer you're in AI, like Jeff Hinton, who invented backpropagation, he quit Google to go around and tell people there's a 20% chance that this kills us all, 10 to 20%. I think it's about there. I speak at AI conferences to the researchers. I do an informal poll. They call it P-doom. What's your P-doom, probability of doom by AI? The majority of hands go up by the time it's dropped down to 20%. There's like one guy in the room that says, nah, it's 1% or less. So the more that you're into it, the more you realize there's risk. I'm not a doomer. I'm just saying we need to be aware of that. But the thing is, we can control, we can influence that. That's not static. We can shift those odds way in humanity's favor. In order to do it, we have to do what you wrote in your mission statement. keep people at the heart of everything we do. Because at the end of the day, if you have AI that is smarter than you or I, which it will be, by not a little, but a lot, then all that matters is it positive and loving towards us or not? And that's a values thing. And by keeping people at the heart of the systems, we are training the AI systems on human values. That's the thing that people don't really quite get. They're so caught up in the technology, they don't realize at the end of the day, it's not technology, it's our values that's going to matter.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that up. That's like the idea I named this company Enhanced AI was, I feel like it's enhancing the human experience. What is in your soul that could be enhanced? Like if you're gonna, I feel like it's a vehicle to enhance the human condition. Whether you're enhancing for good or for evil. Hopefully, as a society, we all push for what's good. But I think our goal is to help enhance the good inside of people and help them achieve more and do more.
And that's a beautiful vision, and it's exactly right. I think it's spot on. I do not think it is an exaggeration to say that whether there's this bad outcome or the good outcome depends primarily on that. Because AI will enhance for sure, and it's going to be what does it enhance? And you can actually, as a company CEO and an AI engineer or designer, you can influence that by making the system easier to make the design of the system so that it's easier to incorporate positive human values, or you can make it really hard. It's like you have a lot of influence there.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Actually, that's a really good insight. Man, you're very insightful here. I've really enjoyed this conversation so far. Okay, we probably need to start wrapping up the conversation with maybe one or two more questions here. But I probably could go for a couple hours actually talking with you about this stuff.
Well, this is a lot of fun. And like I said, I've been staring at this problem for a long time.
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe I'll ask just kind of an interesting kind of riddler question. So maybe if you could solve one challenge in AGI development tomorrow, maybe what would that challenge be? Is it the ethics, kind of what we've talked about, or is there maybe something else when we look at the idea of AGI and what that might mean for folks?
Well, in the end, it is the ethics. So there's an important point if we can take a real brief philosophical diversion, okay?
Yeah.
So Herb Simon wrote a book, 1981, called Reason in Human Affairs. Super small book. I love small books because it means they're concise.
Yeah.
And in it, he says, reason, he was talking about reason and logic generally. Reason cannot tell you where to go. At best, it can help you get there, right? So the idea was that there's no way to logically derive values. And this idea actually, and he admits it, is not unique with him. It goes all the way back to David Hume in 1776. Philosopher came up with this. But that idea is very important for AI, I think, because what it tells me is that even if superintelligence is developed and it's 100,000 times smarter than you or I. You and I blink our eyes and it's thought about the problem for an entire human lifetime. So we have no chance of competing with this intelligence, and it's autonomous, and essentially we're at its mercy. Even that level of intelligence cannot logically say this is right and this is wrong. It's got to get its values the same way we do, from our parents, our peers, or our religion, or whatever it is. And what that means is that humans are in a really good place as the creators of this AI that's going to get smarter, to sort of impress and imprint on it some positive human values during this formative period. And that's what we need to do.
I probably had like 3 ideas for science fiction novels in this conversation so far, including that one. That's incredible. I love that perspective. I think that's so interesting. If you think about 100 years from now, AI is doing all sorts of things. Yeah, we're in a good spot. We're the mother, right, of the AI that, and given its values. Right.
And that's a perfect analogy because I think it really is like a parent. AI right now is like a very impressionable young child. It's watching everything we do, and it's learning what we say. And the thing that we need to watch out is just like a new parent usually figures this out. If you accidentally swear or do something and then your child repeats it, you're like, who taught you that? Well, I saw you do that, Daddy, right? And that's what's Yeah, right. It wasn't me. It was my spouse. But that's what's going on right now. It's actually happening right now. So if you think about how are these models trained, they're trained with data on the internet. What is data on the internet? It's all your emails, all your tweets, all the stuff that's out there. And that means it's got all your good impulses and all your bad impulses. But we are not behaving as if we were modeling, the future values that are going to come boomeranging back at us. We're kind of like not really aware of that, and we need to be.
Yeah, yeah, I think we need to improve. Okay, so let's end with one more question because we could keep going on for a long time. So I want to come back to your Wall Street, predict Wall Street experience. When you think about AI and kind of early days, people started talking about universal income and what does that even mean? Where do you kind of see this idea of our relationship with money potentially changing as a society as AI starts coming in and filling in, first of all, tasks that we're doing every day? Maybe it can find ways of balancing money. We're not in a communist society. We never will be, from what I can tell. But we have these machines that can do so much for us. Do you see, how do you see kind of our relationship with money changing in the future? Because I love these. You're predicting a lot of things I 100% agree with, and I haven't heard before, and it's great insight. So maybe your insight here on
Where are we going on money and capitalism? I think it depends a lot on us, really. So I heard Elon Musk at a conference, I think in Saudi Arabia, just a couple of weeks ago, and he was asked, about jobs and so forth. And he said, in the future, I think work's going to be optional. I mean, you only work if you want to. There'll be no reason to work, and you probably won't need money either. And so that's one vision of the future, and that could definitely happen. It could also be that, a few very powerful tech companies sort of siphon all the benefit, the productivity from AI into themselves and certain corporations, and the humans are left behind. There's no doubt in my mind that an abundance will be produced. I mean, if you think about it, all of the abundance that's been produced so far has come from what? Human thought and ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
If you can multiply that 1,000 times and have it run 24/7 and never sleep and never eat, I mean, it's going to be a world of abundance. I would like to think that will be shared, if not equally, at least proportionally with everybody. And even that will be enough to raise everybody's standard of living up to be fantastic. And so that's what I think is the most likely. But it is possible that we could really screw that up if somebody got super greedy. I don't know why you would want to do that, but I mean, there are people like that.
Yeah, I agree that there's something about, though, the idea of maybe it's innate in humans, and I think it's probably to their virtue when they overcome it, but I have more than you. It's that pride inside of the innate human. A lot of virtuous folks a lot of folks build the virtue of overcoming that and being more humble and not necessarily focusing on that kind of pride cycle. But we'd have to overcome that. I would say to be able to get to that next phase. And can you? I mean, there's lots of things we could focus on instead of that, but will people?
Well, I think people like to be individuals and to self-actualize, I think, as well. And, we happen to be in a society where there's this scorecard of money, and sort of the more money you make, somehow like you feel like I got more power and I've succeeded and everybody can look at me. But what if it was the better art I produced, or the more beautiful music, or whatever, or just the more I did what I loved doing? Mm-hmm. So I think it's not necessary to make humans just sort of zombies that don't really do anything. I think there's plenty. Ideally, it's an environment where you have more freedom to express that which makes you unique. And as a side note, I would say, I'm fairly certain that AI itself will value that in humans. If you think about it, the way these things are trained, right? You train up an AI, and what's out there on the internet, it's kind of like the mediocre average of, I mean, part of the reason why the responses you get back sound like you're in the middle of a large company in a boring meeting or whatever with these processes, step one, is because there's so much of that on the internet, and it's been fed that. That was its diet. So that was its diet, and that's what it thinks it is intelligence. But actually, as that becomes commoditized, what really becomes important, both for humans and maybe for the AIs, is that uniqueness. What about Brad sets him apart from all the other humans? How does he think a little different? How does he look at the world a little different? It's that uniqueness, because all the sameness has already been learned. So the last bit of juice that the AIs can learn from the human is, oh, I haven't got that insight that only Brad has, right? And that's going to be like the price on that's going to go off the charts.
I love it. So, and that just empowers the individualism of each person and the value of each person out there, which I think is such a strong message when people really embrace that. Is, yeah, you're just not a me too. Of course, you're the individual. No one's like you, and that's actually incredible. Okay, so I think we can keep going, but let's leave it with that. That's a really positive message to leave this on.
Sure.
Dr. Craig Kaplan, we really appreciate you being on here and love to do another one at some point, but we know your time is valuable, and we this is precious to just get this much time with you so far.
Well, I appreciate it, Brad. This has been a lot of fun. If people want to learn more, superintelligence.com is the website. There's all kinds of videos and stuff. And I want to congratulate you on your mission and what you're doing. I think it's great. You're ahead of most of the folks that I see by putting that heart at the center.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, we've been honored to have you here, and I love what we're doing right here in this world of AI. It's just so fascinating. I've never had more fun in my whole career than what we're doing right now, and feel blessed to be this close to it and deep in it, because it's just fascinating. It's so much fun. So
I'm right there with you.
I believe it. Okay, well, thanks, and we'll see you all next time. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
That's it for today's episode of AI Near and Far. Big thanks to today's guests for joining us and sharing their story. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you prefer to watch these episodes, you can find them all on YouTube. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a quick review. I'm Brad Moss, and thanks for spending some time with us. We'll catch you next time as we continue exploring how real people are using AI to shape what's next. Until then, keep on building.